I remember when I was really young, I was always fascinated, just with the simple task of making an image, creating the illusion of reality on a page. I still remember the excitement of watching my father draw a horse. And I remember just sort of turning myself inside out with delight. He conjured up this image. And then when he'd finished, I'd ask him if he could perhaps place a rider on it. The whole process just to me seemed magical. I think that's what I really sort of enjoyed about drawing. You could do it spontaneously, you could find a bit of paper, pick up a pencil, everything was there in front of you. It didn't occur to me that I would ever want to do it as a career until I was about 18 or something. These were done in London in 1985. I'd won a scholarship in Sydney. It was the Sydney Morning Herald Travelling Arts Scholarship. So I had an exhibition at New South Wales House, 10 years of an artist's life, which is also a play on a painting by Courbet, which was a painting of his studio and all the people that he knew inside there. So it's a self-portrait and then just symbolic references to just different things that were influencing me at the time that have sort of more of a personal association, I suppose. Others like The Day on the Solent was just a sort of whimsical look at people sort of down having a day on at the beach, experimenting with the idea of surface and an illusion. Elements of that I've maintained and continue to do today. All of these were sold in the exhibition, which is always a happy thing to happen, but often unexpected. In 1987, I did a series of paintings after I'd returned from England. I did a few drawings which I loosely described as figure filled. They were like field paintings, like abstract paintings, and in a sense, except they were made up of figures. So they had that same sort of vibrating surface idea that sort of interested me at the time. And they sort of morphed into these constructions and making sort of symbolic statements, using something that is very elemental. And somehow sort of nature is thrust into these ideas that we have of it, to preserve this or to sort of take that. It becomes an artefact as much as a general scene. I've tended to make exhibitions that revolve around a project, an idea, and then I'll fish around for an appropriate style or an appropriate sort of method. It wasn't something that was important that I should sort of find a particular style and stay with it. I'd find appropriate ways of expressing a particular idea, and then I'd have an exhibition based around that idea using that particular technique. And then the next time I felt, well, I've covered that ground, I'd want to move on. And I started doing some narrative as well as sort of these sort of large type of iconic representations of other ideas via a figurative medium. This was Strutting with the Animals, which is a reference to William Strutt, the colonial artist in Australia, and a painting he did of fire, how that affects animals as well as humans. This is an exhibition I had in 1990, Make Your Bed, Lie in It, which was all about the consequences of sort of environmental actions. You stuff something up, then you're going to face whatever retribution lies down the track. Figures with TV was another work. It was all to do with patterns, the pattern of the light, Aboriginal sort of references. At the time, I remember Bill Hadyn was sort of interested in my work. He actually put that image on his Christmas card for that year. I've had about 3 exhibitions revolving around this idea of extinct plants. This first work, it's based on a painting by Baston Lepage, and a French realist painter. This painting here represents a type of plant that was around over 200 million years ago. It Tabula Subites, the circle of life. It was a piece of writing by somebody called Cebes, who was a disciple of Socrates. It was a metaphorical dwelling which you enter, which represents the course through life. So you enter through the front door and you're met by fate, who hands you a glass of wine which represents error or ignorance, and depending on how much wine you take will somehow determine what your life's course might be. And they're all very much based on just emotional sort of states, I guess. These works were done in between 91 and 92. It's called the Greenpeace series. And I was quite intrigued in that this was a group of mostly younger people who decided that they were going to directly confront the perpetrators of various sort of outrages, whether that was emptying nuclear waste into the sea, which they used to do. And one was a painting which depicted these Greenpeace warriors stopping a boat from dumping uranium waste into the ocean. I based a painting on a sort of a 19th century, sort of almost like a biblical scene where the ascension of Christ, or the reference to Jericho's After the Medusa. I set it all up in a church and got the actual zodiac and hauled it up at a wild angle and got all these art students. I constructed this tableau which I then photographed and based the painting on that. I didn't sell it, I've got it up in my studio in Wollombi. I had an exhibition, it was Brenda May Gallery, and it was called A Votive Thing. The name suggests something that's done in appreciation, or as a vow, as the fulfilment of a vow. It came together, with 6 months or so. And I've always been attracted to the idea of landscape and reinterpreting landscape and using historical references. This one is a show where I just wanted to look at the history of landscape painting in Australia and go back to some of the iconic sort of pieces in the Australian canon, your Roberts and Streetons and Walter Withers, Hugh Ramsay, a lot of the works that would be familiar to a lot of people. Sort of channel, in a way, the feelings and the ideas behind those paintings and the way they were made, and reinterpret them as in a contemporary context, by way of sort of making a commentary as much as simply reproducing somebody else's work. So this exhibition was really motivated by a sort of a sense that I wanted to connect with the historical, the heritage of painting in Australia. So the references are recognisable, but the work that comes out of it is a sort of a hybrid thing that's that's a different painting, a different picture altogether. These were works that influenced me, that made me sort of want to take up painting in the first place. I mean, it was that tonal school, the 18th and early 19th century, early modernism. This is an area that has always sort of been close to my heart. So the idea of making paintings that use some of these references was always enticing. Landscapes that represent a complete fracture with the past. I think regardless of what you do, there's a sense that you're part of a continuum.